So I went over and asked Eleanor, I said, well, would you go for a walk with me across campus? She turned me down. She says, well, no, I'm going with Steve, this guy. And I kind of knew that, but she had this girl standing there. Her name was Patricia. So he said, well, why don't you go on your walk with her? That was my introduction to her. So I said, well, okay.
Okay.
Welcome to the Spencer Whiteout podcast. Rated R.
Criminal charges with you, bro. Guess like we're avoiding the sharks. We'll call it leather fetish.
No, kid, turbo neck guy.
I'll give you a kiss. You give me your number.
That checked out a ton, dude. Tell me you felt.
We're Americans. We're the ones that are descendants from the 1776 musket-bearing motherfuckers.
Welcome to the Spencer Whiteout podcast, where we collect experiences as badges, memories as treasures, and stories as wealth. Recorded on July 29th, 2021, this is part one of a special conversation with my dad and his dad. In this episode, we tell stories of family upbringing, growing up in LA, Christmas chairs, run-ins with the cops, drag racing, the Revolutionary War reenactment, and much more. It's been a blessing to preserve this account of family history, and I'm happy to share it with this world as well. Let's dive in.
Okay, so today on the podcast, I have my dad, Keith White.
Hello, I'm Keith.
And then I have my grandpa, which I call Papa.
That's me, and Larry.
I was going to start at the beginning, but I kind of want to start off with a really funny anecdote and story, and that is the egg timer. And then we can get into more of Papa's life story.
The famous egg timer.
Do you remember this?
Yeah. We have this little wind-up timer that was sitting on our mantle. We use it all the time for checking how long to cook stuff, in the kitchen, whatever. So something was on the stove, and it was burning because it had been on too long. And so my wife, Pat, well, where's the timer? Didn't it go off? So I find the timer, and it's stuck. And so I think, well, the timer didn't go off because there's something wrong with it. And so I accidentally threw it on the hearth on purpose. Accidentally on purpose. I said, oh, no, it's broken. So now we'll have to get a new one. Because I have learned a long time ago that if it's not really badly broken, you wind up trying to make it work. So I figured if it's really broken good, then we'll have to get a new one.
True.
And I remember being in the other room with my two sisters, and we could hear my dad. He's talking to himself out loud, and he's going,
"This dumb timer, this thing always gets stuck, and it never works right. We're never going to get another one unless this thing is really broken."
You're right.
And then all of a sudden, boom, we heard it from the other room.
Slammed it down on the rock hearth.
On the hearth, and just shattered it, and we all are just like scared in the other room.
Whoa, what happened? What?
And so we go in there, and the whole thing is broken, and Dad's sort of smiling. Well, it's broken, and now we need to get a new one.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Right? No, that's good.
Funny.
That's a great intro story.
All right, let's get started.
I want to talk to you today, Papa, and just hear about where you were born, where you grew up, and just more of your life story.
Wow. Well, since I'm 82 years old, no, I'm 83 years old. I don't know how old I am. I'm 83.
Up there somewhere.
So that's a long time. My memory of birth is fading.
Yeah.
Well, I was born in San Francisco, and my brother was also born there. We were a year and a half apart. So I remember when I was probably like a year and a half, because I was a year and a half older than my brother. And my parents bring home this new baby, and I'm just a year and a half little toddler. And they wouldn't let me go in to see the baby because they were afraid I might do something wrong. Oh. So anyway, I insisted on sneaking in down the hall in the bedroom where that baby was, and looked in the crib, and there was this tiny baby in there. Hi, baby. So he was going to become my brother.
What's his name?
David.
Yeah, I want to hear about your siblings, because I know you have a few siblings, and if you were close to them growing up and what that was like.
Well, David was the only one I was close to, because we were close together in age. I had an older sister. She was Wanda June. She was 4.5 years older than me, and she was really a half-sister because She was my mother's daughter from a previous husband. But just after my sister was just a couple of weeks old, her dad had been gone on a car trip, and they got in a wreck and was killed.
Wow.
And so suddenly my mom is a single mom with this tiny baby. And so with the insurance money, it was interesting. She bought a car and went to college.
Wow.
She went to Abilene Christian. And, of course, the family terribly objected to that because that was a waste of money to buy a car and to go to school. I mean, nobody in Oklahoma went to college, you know. So, but that's what she did, and that's where she met my dad.
What did she study?
You know, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
My dad was studying religion. He was preparing to be a preacher, and so they probably met in class. But also my dad, even though he was preparing to be a preacher, he was actually hired by Abilene Christian to teach art, because he had, as a young person, when he was just growing up, he saw one of these ads in a paper, "Can you draw this?" And so he drew it and sent it in. And so they sent him a bunch of materials to learn how to be an artist. Wow. And so he did all this kind of by correspondence and felt like he was an artist. So sure enough, when he got old enough to go to college, he told them that he knew how to do all the art. They actually hired him to teach a class.
Wow, that's great.
And so he was teaching an art class. And
Was he good, or were they just kind of desperate?
Shots fired.
Well, back in those days, Christian colleges were just getting started, and they had no strength in their faculty. They were just trying to figure out how to do this college kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so they hired my dad because he was a good Christian, and so they knew that his testimony would be proper in the college, even if he was a little shaky on the art. But he did very well, and he met my mom in that situation. And so when they decided to get married, they decided they would go to California. Because some people in the church they were involved in told my dad, "If you'll come to California, you can be our preacher."
Right on.
Oh, wow. I don't think I knew that at all. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that would have been in San Francisco. My mom and dad just getting married, they come to San Francisco, and sure enough, my dad's mom decided she was going to go with them.
We were in this together.
Oh, boy.
They're going on their honeymoon, and she jumps in the car with them, and she goes with them. And my mom and my grandma, they never did get along too well.
Oh, boy.
That was a bad start.
Don't say it!
No, but actually, Papa, you did something similar when my parents moved up to NorCal. You followed them, didn't you?
Well, we both
Sort of.
came at the same
Yeah.
time, but we weren't following each other.
Yeah.
Okay,
But we were keeping track.
funny correlation, though.
Yeah.
Okay, what about these Christmas chairs?
Oh,
Yep.
oh yeah. Well, when my brother and I were probably 10 or somewhere around that age, and my parents were gone. They were on a shopping trip somewhere, and we had been poking around the house, and we discovered these two little chairs that are just big enough for little kids, and they were hidden in the closet underneath a bunch of clothes. And so we pulled those chairs out, and so we thought these are pretty slick because they were just our size. So we were out in the front of the house, sitting in these chairs in the driveway when my folks came driving up. Here we are sitting in our new chairs, and they were supposed to be for Christmas, and my mom was very upset.
How could you do this to me?
I love that.
Yep.
Did you know that it was for Christmas?
Yeah, we knew, but, well, we found them, so we might as well use them. I mean, we're just kids. We're not going to worry about doing everything right.
I love that you're just like flaunting it, putting it out on the front driveway, just waiting for them just to see the reaction.
It's not like sitting in the house or something. We took them out front so they could see us sitting in them when they drove up. What a shock to my mom.
Right. I love that. Was your brother David pretty much your best friend growing up?
Yeah, we did everything together when we were small. Actually, I really miss David in some ways. He was a lot smarter than me. He was the intellectual, more like my dad. So I was more into athletic stuff and playing hide-go-seek or whatever boys did. And David would be more interested in things I would never think of doing. Like he started a program for the neighborhood kids doing plays we had this little shack out behind our garage. We called it the shed or the clubhouse. And so we put on a show for the neighborhood. And this is all David's idea. So this is kind of the way he was. Then he started doing models, metal cars or model airplanes and stuff. So later on, after we had been doing models for a while, he decided to make an airplane that you fly. There's a pair of wires on from a handle that you hold. Plane is sitting way out there, and it takes off, and it flies around in a circle, and you're guiding it with this thing in your hand. And so I went out and I was at the airplane, and so David was holding the control. And so I started the little gas engine on the airplane, you know, and this little tiny airplane. It's actually a little gas engine, compression engine. Wow. And so we got it started. And so I hold the plane up and I'm aiming it to where the circle will be around. And so he said, okay, let it go. So I let it go, and it took off around and went right into the ground. My brother didn't really know how to do it, so he turned the control too far, and the plane just dived right into the ground, and it sheared the wing off and kind of shattered the plane.
Wow. Kind of shattered his dreams.
It was a big shock. And so David, being the handicrafter that he was, he put that busted up plane all back together, went to a lot of trouble, got it all fixed up. Okay, this time we're going to do it right. So I'm out there, I'm holding.
Here we go. Famous last words.
I'm holding the plane. I get it started. The engine's going, and so I said, okay, let it go. And so I kind of set it out, and it takes off. It's going around, and then it goes around about a fourth around the circle, and it goes smash right into the ground again.
There's deja vu.
So I did the same thing twice. Well, that was the end of that plane. Forget that. We're going to do something else.
This thing doesn't fly.
Love that. Dad, that reminds me of the kite, Dad.
Oh, man. I'm sorry, Spencer. Yeah. Every time I think of that, it's like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, really. We were flying a kite out at the beach, and it's a two-handled kite to where you can control it, and trick kites, and you can do tricks and things with it. So I said, okay, Spencer, and you're only 5, 6, 7 years old or so. So you go out there and
really
you hold
remember
it
this, yeah.
and sort of throw it as I jerk it up, and then it'll fly up there, and then we can watch it. And so I said, okay, ready, Spencer, go. And so he throws it, and I pull on it, and it starts flying. And so Spencer started looking, and then he sees that it's sort of like not quite going, and so he starts running. And so I'm trying to get it up and get it flying, and the thing just crashes down right on top of Spencer. I'm sorry, I just knocked him to the ground and everything.
To the ground.
Good shot.
I know.
Good shot, Dad.
I did not mean to do that, but I couldn't.
I remember
control
running from it. Yeah, because you couldn't control it, and you were like holding on for dear life, coming right towards me, and then it just attacked me.
Oh, boy. Yep.
I'll always remember that one. Yeah.
In the news, we've been hearing about these drones.
Yeah.
That some countries are using them to spy. So this kite was like a little miniature drone.
Pretty much.
Took out my own son.
Yeah.
I stopped flying a kite after that.
So, Papa, you said you grew up in San Fran. Did you grow up there all the way through high school, or did you move around at all?
No, we moved to Los Angeles when I was like 2 or 3 years old. And we don't hardly remember San Francisco, but
gotcha,
because we were pretty little when we came down to Southern California. So we lived in South Central Los Angeles, right down where the Watts riots were. But that was way before then. Yeah. Actually, way back then, Los Angeles was a very nice neighborhood back in those years. Yep. It was before any of the unrest, before any of the troubles. So we lived in a very nice neighborhood, and we lived just 2 blocks from Pepperdine, where my dad had become the teacher. And so there were quite a number of different children up and down the block, and we all played together. We played hide-go-seek or baseball or hit the bat or all kinds of stuff. We had all kinds of, we had war games. Sometimes there was the right time of the year, around the corner there was this dirt lot that grass grew up pretty tall. It probably grew up like 8 or 10 inches or a foot tall. And if you grabbed a handful of grass and pulled it up, it would come up with a handful of dirt on it, and if you would throw that, the grass was like a tail, and it was sailed beautifully.
Like a missile.
So we dug trenches at different sides of this big lot, and so we had war. And so we would pull up these clods of dirt with big tails of grass on them, and we'd throw them at each other.
Killing friends.
Nobody ever got hurt, but so that lasted a little while.
Pelted with a dirt clod.
Yeah, that reminds me of what you did in class.
Well, the Revolutionary War reenactment.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a teacher, so I try to make class fun and interesting. So at the end of our Revolutionary War unit, I would actually have the students reenact the war, and I drafted half the students to be in the British Army, and the other half could be in the Colonist Army. And the British, they had to stand up in front of the room, like dressed up soldiers, and line up shoulder to shoulder. And then the colonists, they could hide behind the desks, and we threw paper wads at each other. So it was a pretty wild day, and it was fun. And I remember one time the principal walked by, and I had it in my lesson plans, but she didn't understand what I was actually doing. Right. So I got called into the principal's office.
Because it just looked like chaos.
Explain, what are you doing in that classroom? What if a parent walks by? So she said, well, maybe you should do this outside. I said, I probably shouldn't, because then I'll lose control of those 8th graders. They'd be running to Auburn and back and just take off and disappear, and I wouldn't have any control. So I said, all right, well, we'll compromise. I'll put a sign on the door that says, "War in progress, enter at your own risk."
Wow, that's good.
So that worked out. It was a good compromise.
I understood that one time some of the students managed to get out in the hallway, throwing their missiles at each other down the hall, and so that raised a little bit of a flurry with other people in the school.
But Dad, you didn't do this just once. You did this every year.
Every year, and the students look forward to it. Yep, I keep hearing about it from the seniors. Come back and they say, "Oh yeah, I remember that paper wad war."
Come on, you gotta take your hat off to them.
So, Papa, you mentioned that your brother was doing all kinds of, I don't even know, what would you call it?
He was the guy who had ideas.
People with higher IQs have slightly bigger heads.
Yeah, just stuff to try. It's like, like he started collecting pennies, developed a whole collection of these Indian head pennies from 1909 all the way to current. We would go to banks and get bags of pennies and go through them and then take them back to the bank and get another bag of pennies.
That's awesome. And was he into old cars and stuff like you were? And when did that hobby develop?
Actually, when we were early high school, probably, David actually located this 32 Ford.
Those are very desirable.
I don't know why he was looking around, but he found this guy had a 32 Ford that was for sale. So we went together to look at it, and it had a 48 Mercury engine in it, which is kind of like the hot engine of the time, because this was back in the 50s. So the engine was supposedly ported and relieved, which gave it a lot more power, and it had a 3/4 race cam in it, which made it a very fast car. And so that was in that 32 Ford. And so we drove that around town, and we could...
He bought the car?
Yeah, we bought the car.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't running when we got it, but we got it running. We had to get an intake manifold and carburetors onto it and finish it up. So we did all kinds of things to try to fix it up. It's like we bobbed off the rear fenders to make it look more like a hot rod. So anyway, I would drive around town with that car, and it was about the same time that I had started dating with my wife, Pat, and she hated that car.
I don't think so.
But I would take her out on a date in this rattly 32 Ford. And it was, the floorboards weren't complete, so when you're driving down the street, air is rushing up to the floorboards right into the cab.
It's kind of like a roller coaster.
Yeah. And of course, it would get hot sometimes, and so we'd have to stop and put water in it again. I remember one time we went on a sub-T trip. That was our fraternity that I was in college. And, well, actually on the way home from that retreat, which was quite some ways from home, we were on the freeway, San Bernardino Freeway, driving home in this 32 Ford. And we got stopped by the police 3 different times.
Oh, wow.
Now, we got stopped, and the guys police guy, he just looks at the car and he lets us go. He just wanted to check it out. And so as soon as we get going, then another cop stops us, and then he checks it out and lets us go, and then a third cop stops us. And I thought, we can't go anywhere without the cops stopping us.
They must have radioed ahead. Hey, you got to stop that car to look at it. Look at that 32 Ford.
Yeah. Well, at one time I was right in town, and you know how you make a stop at a stop sign? I was in a quiet neighborhood, residential neighborhood, and I stopped at the stop sign, but the car didn't completely stop, and there was a cop sitting there. And then I took off, and he pulled me over and gave me a ticket for not making a full stop. And I was probably going like half a mile an hour. I mean, it was just barely moving, but he gave me a ticket. So anyway, when I got the ticket, the fine was $10. So that was, but that year I got 3 tickets.
Oh boy.
All of them nonsense things.
Yeah. That sucks.
They're just jealous of your car, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that was it. Yeah. One day we were coming home from this sub-T function, and one of the guys had a 57 Chevy. And this was in 1957, so he had the hottest car on the road, 57 Chevy Power Pack. So it was all the stuff that you could get stock from the dealer. And so it's like he could pass up anybody. Nobody could pass him. So I said, oh, you want to bet? So we were coming home from this function on Firestone Boulevard in Los Angeles, which is a big thoroughfare right through eastern part of Los Angeles. And so we'd go off together from a stop sign, the light would turn green, and so the two of us would take off, and we would be pretty much parallel with each other. But I could go faster than him. But anyway, we did that only a couple of times, and pretty soon here's all these cop cars pulling us over.
Oh, boy.
They forced us off the road. We turned onto the side street. So they got us out of the cars, and they actually lined us up over against this wall, put our hands up on the wall, up high on the wall, and they frisked us, like they were going to get all the weapons off of us. Well, anyway, the guy with the 57 Chevy, he had a little tiny penknife in his pocket.
Oh, man.
So they found that little knife, ridiculous little tiny thing. Yeah. But so they started quizzing him like crazy. What do you do with this knife, So anyway, the one car who pulled us over, they called down, and pretty soon there was 3 cop cars around us.
Oh, boy.
They had nothing else to do, really.
Yeah.
So after they checked us all out and looked us over, they didn't even write us a ticket. They just finally said, all right, you guys be cool going home and don't go off together.
Okay.
Just obey the rules, and we'll leave you alone.
Wow.
You won the race,
fortunate.
right?
Yeah. There was another guy who was in one of the classes I was in when I was at Pepperdine. He was an art student. He had a car that he thought was really fast. It was some kind of an old Chevy, but it had been hopped up. It was a Chevy from like the 30s or somewhere. But anyway, he thought that was a really fast car. He said, oh, I could beat you easy. So I said, okay, I'll meet you on so-and-so street. And we described a place where we could do a little drag race. And so we lined up, and this street is all clear way ahead of us. Nice wide street and nothing there to bother anybody. And so somebody said, go. And so we went off together, and I stayed right with him for quite a ways just to tease him.
Make him feel good.
And so we got down to the end, and I said, oh, that's pretty good. So your car's pretty fast. So I said, let's do it again.
Wow.
I said, I didn't really put my foot in it. So we go back, we do it again. And so we take off. So I stay with him for maybe 100 yards. And then I trumped it. And I just went away from him like he was standing still. And so he was totally embarrassed.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, Papa, how is your car so fast? How are you beating all these hot rods?
It was just a very fast car. Well, the 48 Mercury engine, I mean, that was an engine for a big car.
Yeah.
The 48 Mercury was a large automobile, 2-door or 4-door sedan. And it was in my little tiny 32 Ford, which was a 5-window coupe, actually. And it's a very light car.
2-door.
And so that thing, being such a light car and such a big, heavy engine, that thing would just scream. And
That's
it was
great.
kind of funny because I remember one day I went into a Big Donut drive-in. You ever hear a Big Donut drive-in? When I was driving slow, the engine was so hot it would lope. Vroom, vroom, vroom. By itself, that's just what it would do when it was idling.
It's like it's purring, like it's some lion or tiger.
Yeah. Just waiting to pounce.
So so if you're going real slow, it would go vroom, vroom, vroom. So the car would take off with each vroom, and it would slow down. And vroom, it'd take off and slow down, and take off and slow down. So I'm loping down the street. So I'm looking kind of stupid that way. But people look at that, what's this guy doing? So any number of guys would challenge me, thinking, oh, that car's not that fast. It's just an old wreck. So when I had the rear wheels were great big tires off of a Buick. And so the big rear wheels and the small front wheels, that thing was just really truck. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Now, you said that you and your brother fixed up that car, right? That one?
Well, fixed up is probably not the right word. We hot rodded it. We did a lot of things to it to make it. I mean, we were just kids, high school kids. And so we decided we didn't like the dashboard in the interior. So my brother tore out the dashboard and he made a new one out of fiberglass. Perfect. And it was actually pretty clever. So we had put a 1940 Ford, the controls off the dashboard, the speedometer and all the gauges that come in a 40 Ford. So that was modeled into the new fiberglass dashboard. So we put that in there. So that looked pretty sexy.
Did you guys share the car, or did you have two different cars?
Yeah, we both just use it. David, I don't remember for sure. He might not have been legal driver yet. But then after we had it for like a year or so at Pepperdine, that was where I met my wife. And so my life changed. I lost interest in the car and became interested in my girlfriend. So I actually wound up buying another car. I bought a 51 Chevy Coupe, which is a very plain, kind of an old man's kind of a car, but very conservative. So therefore, we could drive somewhere without raising anybody's hackles. It was just a very tame car.
And Grandma liked that one a lot better, huh?
Yeah, that was a car we had when we got married.
Yeah.
And so we went on a honeymoon in that car.
Nice. Well, I want to talk about the honeymoon in a little bit. What ended up happening with the car then? So your brother kept it, but then he passed away shortly after, correct?
Well, he had it for a while. So we had all gone up to Big Bear Lake. We loved going up there. There was a Christian camp up there, and we spent a lot of time up there through the years. And so David was up there, and he had been horseback riding with a group of kids that he knew up there. And so they were in town on the main drag coming out of Big Bear Lake, the town of Big Bear Lake. And they were all on one side of the road on their horses. And this one girl was kind of shaky about horses, and her horse took off and started running with her. And so she's kind of screaming. And so my brother, he felt like he was going to be a hero. So he takes off after her to try to catch her and save her from her runaway horse. Well, in the process, he got over on the other side of the road where she was, which was the wrong side of the road. And so as he was running his horse, there was a car in the street who turned left right in front of the horse. And the horse, running full bore, suddenly this car was right in front of it, and the horse actually tried to jump the car.
Wow.
Well, he didn't jump the car. He landed belly right on top of the car. And when the horse hit the car, splat right on top of the car, it threw my brother off. So he landed on the street, and it killed him. So that was quite a shock.
Yeah. How old were you, and how old was he when that happened?
He was 20, so I was 22, I guess. We were a year and a half apart, but I'd already had my birthday, so I was 22 because that's how old I was when I got married.
Wow, so it was the year you got married.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I remember my mother coming to me, and she was real concerned about putting off the wedding because of the thing that had happened with David. And so she said, don't postpone your wedding. You go ahead with your life. Yeah. And so I said, well, yeah, I can do that, So, there was the funeral and stuff all in there. But so Pat was involved too, my wife, through that period of time, seeing a lot of stuff going on with the family.
Yeah. Did she know him at all?
Yeah, she knew David. Yeah. In fact, there was interesting, before I had met Pat, David and I actually had walked through Echo Park in Los Angeles with these two girls that we knew. David had a girl and I had a girl. I don't remember her name. So it was just a girl. And so we were walking together. So that was one time that David and I had done something together in kind of a dating way. But there wasn't much of that because he didn't live that long as we got into that phase of our lives.
Yeah. I don't know too much, but I also heard that did you guys drift apart around that time?
Well, when just something about David was, like I said, the intellectual type, but he was kind of a nerd. And in a way, he kind of was an embarrassment to me. Across the high school campus, he looked like a geek. He walked kind of, like a geek walks. And he had glasses, and he just was not a real handsome looking. So I kind of started avoiding him when I was in high school because I felt self-conscious being next to this guy, even though he's my brother. So he was my best friend growing up, but yet in high school, I avoided him, which was really a sad thing. I think I did him a real disservice, and I always felt really bad about it because before there could be a healing of that kind of thing, he wound up getting killed, and so I couldn't make it up to him.
Yeah.
So it was a hard thing, and it's a thing that I've always wrestled with since that time, that, wow, siblings need to really learn how to respect each other, to treat each other right, and even if there's difficulties, to learn how to treat each other with love and consideration, even if there are things that you don't like about each other.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm sure you're able to instill that in your kids when they were growing up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Dad, for sharing all those things. Pretty powerful.
I'll tell you how I met my wife.
Yeah, we could talk about that.
Actually, before that, I'll say when I was in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be, what I wanted to do when I grew up. But I kind of thought maybe I'd like to be an architect. And I didn't know what that meant or anything. I actually drew some plans for remodeling our house when I was in high school. And my dad and I kind of went over these plans together, and we talked about, yeah, we could do this, remodeling the house and stuff. So my dad started actually getting quotes from some builders to do some of this stuff on our house. And one of the builders took off with the plans and never returned them. So I lost my set of plans, and we kind of lost interest anyway. Decided it was too much of a challenge to remodel the house. So we never did all that stuff.
So those plans were so good, he stole your plans.
He stole my plans. So anyway, that was my first set of architectural stuff. Then after that, we were members of the Inglewood Church, and they were talking about adding a new wing to the church for classrooms. And so I said, well, I'll draw the plans for you. So I drew up a whole set of plans and actually took them to the building department. We got permits and everything. So that was my first big project, doing architectural work. But actually, during all that time, I thought, where am I going to go to college? And so it turned out that since my dad was a teacher at Pepperdine, even though I wanted to go to an architectural school, I thought, well, I could go to Pepperdine and get a good start on my education because I could go to Pepperdine for free since my dad was a teacher there. Since I got free tuition at Pepperdine, that was quite a gift. Actually, they charged me a fee. They charged me $30 a semester.
Oh, boy.
Which is like nothing, you know. So anyway, so one of the things I did at Pepperdine is I joined the choir. I had been in choir when I was in high school. So at Pepperdine, I decided to be in the choir there. So during the first week of school, all the people who were joining the choir were in this choir room. It was called the green room, where the piano was and all these chairs. And where we practiced. And so there's all these new choir members. And so I'm looking everybody over, and there's a bunch of guys and there's a bunch of girls. And so I'm looking at the girls over. And I didn't know
As
any
one
of them.
does, yep.
And so I noticed this one girl that I knew a little bit when I was in high school. Her name was Eleanor. So I thought, I'm going to go ask Eleanor if she'll go across campus with me, and we'll just go for a little walk. So I went over and asked Eleanor. I said, well, would you go for a walk with me across campus? She turned me down. She says, well, no, I'm going with Steve, this guy. And I kind of knew that, but... And so
but
Pat
you'd figure you'd shoot your shot.
So she had this girl standing there with her, and her name was Patricia. And so he said, well, why don't you go on your walk with her? And I had never met her before. I didn't know who she was. So that was my introduction to her.
Oh.
So I said, well, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't really say no, because that would look really bad.
So
on
we
you.
started walking. So we took this walk across the Pepperdine campus there, and actually it was quite a nice walk. The campus, the old campus at Pepperdine, was very nice, landscaped. There was a lot of lawns, and there were a lot of trees on this arcade, kind of this one promenade sort of thing with palm trees all down it, and then there was this water fountain out there with the water gushing up. So we were walking across campus, really enjoying it. So by the end of this walkway, I said, hey, maybe would you go to a movie with me? Well, let's go out to a movie. So she agreed. So I thought, wow. So all of a sudden, I've got a date with this girl I just met. So she agreed to go to a movie with me. So that was our first date.
What do you remember what movie it was?
No, it might have been like Guys and Dolls or one of those kind of movies. Hey, back in the 50s, when this was, movies were decent back in those days. Yeah. There wasn't a bunch of this garbage movies like we have today. So almost any movie we could go to without worrying about anything improper.
Yeah. What made her so special on the walk? Why did you want to ask her to a movie?
I mean, she was female. She was this girl, and she was a nice-looking girl, and I hadn't really looked her over that much. I remember later being in campus and seeing her around. I was kind of sizing up the different girls and looking her over, and I thought, she's pretty cool. And she had a nice figure, and she was nice looking, and she was very intelligent, and she was one of the smart ones. And I thought, man, this gal's really something. So I began pursuing her only. There were a lot of other girls I had my eyes on, but once I got to know her, she was it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Wow, that's sort of similar to my story, too. That's amazing, because I met my wife in college, too, and our first sort of like date was walks. We'd go on walks and get to know her, and she was smart and intelligent and funny and fun and, and good looking, too, from my perspective, and it's like, all right, this is fun. And I asked her out for a first date, which was a movie. Went to go see High Road to China with Tom Selleck in it. So I thought, she'd like that movie. And so anyway, it's
was
sort of
it
funny.
any good? Or?
Yeah, it was okay. It was a high adventure, sort of like Indiana Jones style action movie, but it was fun. And I remember everything else. Just the rest is history.
Well, hold on, Dad. You got to tell just a little bit more, because I think how you guys met is really funny.
Oh yeah, in the cafeteria in college. So I walk in and there was like no seats because the whole place was packed. So I'm walking around with my tray of food. Back then, they had trays.
Well, now they still have the trays, but you do not
Nobody uses them.
You don't use the tray.
Anyway.
You just get your food and you put it at the place, and then if it takes you 2 trips, you do that, but you do not use a tray.
Well, I was carrying my tray around.
Because only freshmen use the trays.
Yeah.
You were probably a freshman.
I was a freshman, yeah. And I was walking
she
around.
was a sophomore.
Yeah. Yep.
And she was like, oh, no, a freshman?
Yeah.
She didn't realize that you took a gap year, so you were actually older than her.
I went to a small 2-year Bible college. But anyway, I found a only seat was next to her. And then probably a minute later, the whole group at the end of the table got up and left. And then the friend that she was talking to got up 30 seconds later, got up and left. So I'm sitting next to this girl at this empty table, and I didn't even know her. So I thought, I better introduce myself, because I thought it'd be pretty rude if I just got up and moved down to the end of the table by myself or something. So I just turned to, hi, I'm Keith. And and so she said, oh, hi, I'm Elizabeth. And I was working on my verse cards, my memory verse cards for a Bible class that I had coming up soon. And she said, oh, she offered to help me with my Bible verses and things. I was like, oh, all right. And so we talked for a while and had a nice lunch. And I thought, oh, she'll make a nice friend. And so, ever since after that, we'd run into each other all over the campus. We'd see each other, and not even expecting to or wanting to really even, but we'd see each other all over, almost run into each other around the corner of a building and things. Whereas before, I'd never even seen her before on campus. Almost like God was pushing us together. So,
well, interesting thing. One day you were up at our house up in Santa Rosa, and we were sitting out back by our pool, I think, and you were kind of having questions or doubts. So you were telling me this, yeah, Elizabeth, I really like her, and she's cool, and I can't remember what all you said, but you were telling me about her, but you didn't know if he wanted to, I'm not sure what's next. Right. And I remember you had shown me some pictures of her, and I had actually seen her one time. And I thought, well, she's a pretty cute young lady.
You're like, I know what's next.
And so I remember telling you, don't let her get away.
Yeah.
You should, go ahead and pursue this,
Yeah. And that was right, and that was fine. And that was sort of like, I thought of God's will in my life with you, Dad, sharing that with me. And so I did pursue her even more after that visit, and it was good, and it worked out. There we are today.
And I love the detail where you guys were almost running into each other everywhere, and you said, I better change my route because she's going to think I'm a stalker, because you were seeing her everywhere.
Yeah, so I'd change my course, and I'd go to chapel at different times, and I'd go different ways to class, and I'd still run into her, still meet her at different places. One time I went down to cash a check at the accounting office or something, and I go up to the front, and I just need to cash this check. And I look up, and there she is in the little window right there. Oh, hi, how you doing? I didn't really mean to come and get the check from you, but no, I didn't say that. But I'm thinking, oh no, I'm seeing her again, and she's going to think I'm following her.
And you were following her.
I wasn't really, honestly, but it just worked out. So after about a couple of weeks, it's like, oh, maybe I should ask her for a walk or something. So we did. And then after about probably a month, because we took our time at dating and getting to know each other and became friends first. But after about a month or so, I thought, that's when I asked her out on a date to go to a movie. And so that was fun. And so we started dating after that. Yep.
So, Papa, how did you propose to Grandma?
Well, I didn't do a formal proposal like you normally think of. We had talked about getting married without actually saying it. And I had told her that I wanted to get married a number of times without proposing, just in kind of a flippant way. So I was planting the seed.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, when the time came and I really wanted to make it official, we had actually gone. At the time, I was a student at UCLA, and one of the faculty guys at UCLA was a jeweler. And so we actually hired him to make our rings. Mm-hmm. So we were kind of doing all this, but it still wasn't official. We were making rings. And so anyway, I made this little heart out of a walnut. It was about the size of half of an apple. I'm trying to think of how to describe it. But it was made out of walnut, and it was kind of dish-shaped. And then I made a little red satin pillow on this walnut heart. I mean, the walnut was in the shape of a heart. And this little pillow had a slot in it, and it had the engagement ring in the pillow. So I brought that over to her house. I was picking her up for a date. And so her mom has this green couch that's kind of in their living room. So oftentimes I would come in and I'd sit on the couch while she's finished getting ready or whatever. And so we were sitting on the couch, and I started bringing out this little heart and handed it to her. And so in essence, she is seeing the engagement ring on the heart. And so that means, okay, let's get married. So I don't remember saying any actual words. It's just that we already kind of knew we were going to get married.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's awesome.
So that made it official when I gave her the ring and the special walnut heart.
Yeah, that's good. What was it like having kids, and was it scary to become a father?
Well, I was really excited. I mean, I had me a son. And I was very proud of my son. I remember taking him to church as soon as it was possible to get him bundled up and, in the church pew with us, in a little bassinet beside us. We were showing off our little boy. And it was kind of a funny thing because the church we were going to was also the same church that Pat Boone went to. And Pat Boone had just had his third girl, and he wanted a son, and he never got a son. But so when we had a son, Pat was jealous. So Pat Boone came around, and he wanted to see this little boy. And so every Sunday morning, he would go to the nursery and look at this little boy that we had because he only had girls.
And who is Pat Boone for the listeners who don't know who that is?
Pat Boone, he was a famous singer back in those days. He was right up there with Frank Sinatra and Perry Como and all those guys. Pat Boone was a very well-known singer. Back in the 50s, everybody knew who Pat Boone was. He was a famous guy. It's kind of funny because his wife, Shirley Boone, was the daughter of Red Foley, who was a famous Western artist back in the East Coast. And anyway.
Yeah, so tell me about the financial position you were in right when you were having kids.
Oh, okay. Nobody had any money to speak of. So Pat had been saving money when we were in college. So she had saved up. So we were putting our money together after we were married. And so when we decided we wanted to buy a house, we had actually saved up $1,260. Wow. Which is nothing today to buy a house with, but that was a lot of money to us. And so we had found this house for sale. And it was $18,000. And so to buy a house in those days, you needed a 10% down payment. So that would be $1,800. So we said we had $1,260. So we had $540 to go. Did I add that right? I'm not sure. Yep. So anyway, we told the realtor that we had $1,260. And so he said, well, let's see what we can do. So he actually loaned us part of his commission to make up the extra 500 or maybe it was 600, whatever it was, to make up the $1,800. Wow. So then we had an $1,800 down payment, and then we had a $1,800 second trust deed from the people who sold us the house. And then there was that's $3,600 from $18,000. So the actual loan was $14,000 or something from the loan company. The actual monthly payment on that house payment was $144 a month. Can you imagine a house payment? $144. Could you afford that?
Yeah.
Well, that was all we could do back in those days. Yeah. We were poor students going to school. So here we are buying this house, and we're still students in school.
Wow.
So we had our little part-time jobs. I was probably making, one job I had was 50 cents an hour.
A working man is a busy man.
So back in those days, pennies were worth a lot.
That's crazy. Wow. What could you get for some pennies back then? Could you get anything?
You could buy a candy bar for a penny.
Really?
A small one.
Yeah.
You know.
What could you get with 25 cents?
Well, for a nickel, you could get a big power bar, kind of a bar. So things were pretty cheap back then.
We're just going to leave it at that.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating/review. 5 stars is a power play. Be sure to follow the show and keep up with me on social media at Spencer Whiteout to stay up to date. As always, stay tuned, stay hyped. That's a wrap.
Inserting exclusive audio recording from the vault.
So I'm asking Dad, when did you become such a passionate storyteller and how?
Well, when I was a kid, I actually would take little naps, or at night, right before I was going to bed, I would actually do a sermon out loud.
Yeah, you told me.
Or in my head, I would go through teaching a sermon or telling a story, but it was mostly a biblical story or something. And so I'd try to think of how I would say it and using different, ways of communicating by storytelling. And so I remember doing that even as a kid. And I thought, well, maybe someday I'll be a youth pastor or a pastor or something that I could use that. I just always had that in my mind. And then later on, actually once I was, a teenager and growing up as a young adult, I just figured out that I would be a good teacher and that I liked telling stories with a moral. And so I worked on that. And trying to be a good storyteller, it takes practice, and almost you got to be sort of an actor.
Yeah, you
a little
do.
bit.
That's a good point.
Yep. But you got to think of how it's affecting the audience too, and your inflections and your words and the different gestures you do, and all those different things all combine, and even drawing out the story to get the base of the story and.
You got to build the
plot
suspense
and then build the suspense up to the climax. Yeah.
Timing is everything.
Yes, yeah, it is, especially for comedians and telling a funny story or a very engaging story. You've got to have good timing too.
I noticed too, there's like a thing with like audience mirroring. If you're like going, oh, and then this and this and this, and you're like getting your eyes wide and you're like raising the energy, then they're mirroring that. You know what I mean? Because they're becoming engaged.
Yeah,
that's part of it too.
That's good.
But was Papa a good storyteller, or like was there other outside influences?
He was.
Yeah, I mean,
different teachers.
Yeah,
but Papa, different teachers.
Tell stories.
I had a good youth pastor too in junior high and high school, and he was good at telling stories, and he would mix in music with it because he was a musician, so he'd play a guitar, he'd sing a little bit. Not usually, but
was he funny?
Yes, he was very engaging, pretty funny. But he was just a good guy, and he focused on character, and was a good influence for me too to pursue maybe being a youth pastor or teacher. So there you go.
When did you become a good one? When were you like,
probably through
I got the chops.
Well, high school, and I could tell a good story, and then in college, and learning how to teach and tell stories in a couple different teaching classes that I took.
I guess you got thrown into the fire just being a teacher.
And
you're
yes,
talking
that too.
All day, every day.
Yeah. But also just going to seminars and other places, learning from master teachers, listening to good storytellers, and then concentrating on, this is how you build it up. This is how you tell it. This is how you give a pause for a clap or, a thoughtful moment. And, there's a lot of different aspects to it. You can't just run through the story.
Oh yeah, pausing for effect for like dramatic pause.
Yep. And building the climax up and things like that is good too. And it's all part of engaging with the audience and helping them to remember it too. If you're a good storyteller, and especially if you get some humor in there, then they'll remember it. They'll remember it a lot more.
You remember that story I told at Aaron and Hannah's about the body in my trunk in my car?
Yeah, that was very good storytelling too. It's like, what? There was a body. I saw him putting a body in my trunk.
Jumpsuit body in my trunk.
In my trunk. So you run over there. What is that? Hold on.
That was so
Stay
scary.
right there.
That was one of the scariest moments.
Yeah.
We thought it was a dead body in the trunk. It's like, how would you respond if you saw someone loading a dead body into your trunk?
It's like, wow. And the way you told it, that was good. Very
so
good.
Insane.
What? Then you run over and you pop open the trunk.
Yeah,
and
nothing.
It was...
I'm glad Luke had my back. He ran right there with me, He wasn't scared, we were both just like... He saw me take off and he's like, hey, and then he ran to him. I got over there.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good explanation of why you should have a brother, have a good friend who has got your back.
Got my back.
And that's it.